What's happening, everybody? We're back at the shop with the 59 El Camino, which we've dubbed Black Ice. It's been undercoated, it's been powder coated. Why? We're gonna get into it, we're gonna answer your questions, and we have 7 months left to get this thing to Grand National Roadster Show 2025. Let's get after it.
All right, Brian, so we're getting some questions here on the powder coating of this build. Why are you powder coating the whole car at this stage?
Great question. The reason why we're doing this is I believe that the powder coat process gives you the best possible barrier coat for the metal because it's baked on at 400 degrees, it's thick, and it gives us a good base coat to start our bodywork and all of our final paint and body.
Would you say this is more cost effective or is it more expensive, like long term, short term?
It's about the same price to have this process done as it would be to have us shoot or any shop shoot an epoxy out of a spray gun. However, you got to consider that this whole car was dismantled in order to powder coat it. So even the doors, the hood, the fender, everything dismantled, sandblasted and powder coated. So it is more expensive to do this process because you have to disassemble the entire car, and that's time, money, and materials.
Now, would this be used as like the primer, or is this the final surface? Like what are we looking at here as far as now that it's powder coated?
Another good question. I think a lot of people think this is the end result for this thing, like we just take it to the powder coater and this is it. In fact, this is a barrier coat. Again, it's the first layer attached to the bare metal. So this is a protective layer. What we'll do is we'll DA this down with 80 grit sandpaper. It'll scuff up the surface and we'll be able to lay body filler, block sand it, and then go through the traditional block prime paint process.
Give me the backstory on this El Camino. When did you get it? How much did it cost? What were the conditions?
So I found this car in the height of the pandemic 2020. I think it was a Craigslist ad. No, it was OfferUp actually. This car was on OfferUp and it was sitting out in the Ontario desert. When I talked to the guy, great guy, and he said, come on out, you can see the car. I've got 2 of them, you can pick which one you want. I paid $6,500 for this car. It was complete minus engine and trans, but it was rusted. It looked much better than it was, which is the case in most of these cars.
So once you picked up this car, you got here to the shop, I mean, what was your feeling, what was your reaction when you actually saw how much rust repair needed to be done?
If it wasn't a 59, we probably would have sold it. I'm not gonna say scrapped it, but we probably would have sold it. Being that it's the first year body style for the El Camino, we really had no choice but to save it. And luckily, companies like Classic Industries sell patch panels and a lot of components for these cars. So there's a great aftermarket community for these things, and that makes our lives a lot easier when we get in here and we're building a resto mod.
After you assessed the rust, what were some of the things you needed to take care of immediately that you saw, okay, this needs to be addressed as soon as possible?
Well, when we began to disassemble this car, all of my hopes and dreams of doing just a quick repaint fell to the floor. Like as soon as we dug into this thing, I'm like, oh man, the body has to come off. We're doing extensive rust repair. We're doing extensive sheet metal replacement. It turned into a full frame off, full-blown restoration / resto mod.
You're calling it a resto mod. So what exactly is that and what does that entail on this particular build?
So a resto mod is just a short term abbreviated for restoration modified or modification. And really, I think what that term encompasses is a mostly stock looking vehicle, whether that be 50s, 60s, 70s. Overall, when someone walks up to it, it's gonna look fairly original. Still gonna have the chrome bumpers and grille and all that stuff. However, when you open the hood, you're gonna notice right away that it's been updated, modified, modern suspension, brakes, drivetrain, Everything under the hood and inside is going to feel like a modern day vehicle. These are a lot of fun to build because I prefer to have a classic look, but sometimes you don't want the classic driver. They're a little clunky, they're a little slow, they don't handle well. But this one here is a little bit different from what we build at my shop. Typically, we do pretty heavy modifications to bodies, frames, chassis, and we really pride ourselves on redesigning a vehicle. But this one isn't quite redesigning. We're actually keeping the original designs of this car, which were done by Harley Earl. And his design is so timeless, I don't really need to change anything. Harley Earl was a GM designer, and he was actually the head of GM design. And this was his last big design project, was the 59 Impala. And of course, as we all know, the Impala was the design, and from there they did the station wagon, and then they did the El Camino. Harley Earl himself was pretty innovative and ahead of his time. He really gave that whole aircraft spaceship look to the late 50s cars. He did things like add tail fins to vehicles. He did the wraparound windshield, first guy to design that. He also designed the Corvette in 1953. And he was also the head of the Dream Car concept. This was a program that designed and built vehicles that were concept cars. It was giving the public an opportunity to see a car that was coming out next year. So they would build a really extravagant, beautiful car. Most of the time it was more beautiful than the actual production car. And in my eyes, this also was the original custom car. And it also gave you that sense of like putting a car on display. So not only was Harley Earl a great designer, but he had an idea to showcase one particular car and one particular design. It was the true one-off vehicle. And because of his concept, now today, all these years later, 70 years later, we're still debuting and building one car at a time in little shops all over the country and taking them to car shows and showing them off and letting people see your work.
What can you tell me about Turner's Auto Wrecking? I know you made a trip up there. What was that trip?
Turner's Auto Wrecking is a junkyard or a parts yard up in Fresno, California, almost in the middle of the state. The owner is named Gary Turner. He's a long-time Fresno hot rodder, motorcycle rider, and he's got to be in his late 80s or 90s. He has an inventory in his head that is unmatched. He can remember if there's a chrome headlight bezel on a 68 Buick. It's incredible. But yeah, it's nice and it's convenient for us because it's 4 hours from the shop, and if we do need something, I can call him first, of course. He'll say he's got it. I can buzz up there and grab a part or cut a panel out of an original vehicle, and it makes our life a lot easier when there's yards like that around.
So this body's going to go on a Roadster Shop chassis, and you talked about that a little bit, but there were a lot of modifications that needed to be done to this car on the underside. What are some of those modifications that needed to be done?
This is a great thing to address when you have a original vehicle and you want to do a chassis swap. There are other things that you have to do sometimes other than just setting the body on the chassis. In this particular case, the Roadster Shop chassis is a traditional parallel frame design. The frame rails run right down the inner rocker. The original design of the floorboard on the El Camino did not allow that to happen. So what a lot of guys simply do is they box out the floorboard so you have room for that chassis rail to sit up in that boxed section. Since we were replacing the floorboards, I thought, why box it out when we can just raise the entire rear floorboard, right? Nobody sits back there anyways, it's in an El Camino. You don't need the additional leg room like they have them drop down. So we just raised them up, really easy. And since we were already fabricating floorboards, we just decided to make a whole new tunnel and a whole new drive shaft tunnel, which is raised, so we have more clearance for the larger engine and the larger transmission. When we decided to do the Roadster Shop chassis, it kind of took the car to the next level. We decided resto mod, new engine, new trans, new drivetrain, new brakes, bigger wheels and tires, just an absolute beast of an El Camino to cruise around the streets and drive daily. All the creature comforts, air conditioning, power steering, power brakes, power windows, power door locks. It should be really, really slick and really fun to drive.
The shop that you took it to, mil spec, they rarely get cars where they get, the body of a car completely undercoated. Why did you do that? Why did you have this car undercoat?
We do this in-house at our shop too. We'll do a spray-on undercoating on the underside of a car. It's basically a rock chip protectant. It gives you a little bit of sound barrier noise. It also looks really nice. This is a great option if you have a classic car and it's clean and you want to give it a little bit of protection underneath. But in this particular case, we were lucky enough to have this car on the dolly already. And since it was coming back from powder coat, I called Chris at Milspec, took the body over there, and we were able to flip the entire body on the rotisserie. He scuffed the whole underside and he gave it 2 heavy coats, bed liner, and then he also sprayed 3 coats of a polyurethane paint on the underside, which adheres right to that bed liner. This gives the ultimate protection from any kind of weather elements, and it looks so sharp on the underside. So
like you mentioned before, the car is back, powder coated, it's got the undercoat on it.
Yeah.
What is next?
What is next? We take a nap. We take a break. Now we're hustling to get this thing done. As you may have heard, this car is going to be unveiled at Grand National Roadster Show in 2024, and then it's going to go to SEMA. 2025. It's going to go to SEMA in 2025. So the next process is we're going to lift it off of this rotisserie. We're going to set it onto the chassis, and we're going to begin all of the exterior bodywork and paint. Over the powder coat, we're going to lay some body filler. We'll block sand that, prime it, and paint the car. After that, it's pretty much all hands on deck to install the engine, transmission, wire it, plumb it, interior shop, bed liner, again, back to Chris at Milspec so he can shoot the bed floor. And then of course, glass weather stripping, test it, test and tune, drive it, and then we'll take it to Grand National Roadster Show in 2025. So I hope all of you guys join us out there and come see the car as we unveil this process and build videos for the next 7 months. I think you're gonna really feel like a personal connection to this car, hopefully, and you'll be able to come and experience it and see it. Grand National 2025. See you there.